Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and what a delight to have with us today Morgan Parker, author of a forthcoming historical thriller. You probably want to get this one ready to go on Amazon. Look for it at Barnes & Noble. 1986, and it'll be coming out a little bit later in June, and it chronicles an incredible day in 1986, 30 years ago today, as a matter of fact, and the world went on tilt. What's it all about? Well, let's talk to Morgan. Hi, Morgan. Good to see you. How are you, my friend?
Happy to be here, Perry. Nice to see you as well.
Boy, what a great Skype. Where are we Skyping you in from? Where are you?
I'm just outside of Toronto, Canada. So it's a bit of a hike, from what I understand.
Oh, Toronto, Canada. Isn't that where the Clintons have their foundation?
it's on top, man.
Good to see you. Well, listen, this is fascinating. What happened 30 years ago today?
Well, you know, it's a really interesting story, and one we tend to forget about. But 30 years ago today, they ran some tests at the Chernobyl power plant, and the greatest human disaster in history occurred on this day 30 years ago. And my novel doesn't so much talk about the actual event, but it's more about the events leading up to the accident and leaves you hanging as to what happened afterwards. And I think that's where a lot of the interesting pieces of history where they dig is what happened after, what continues to happen, and where are we today? Is
it true you've been working on this for about 12 years?
Yes, I was first introduced to the Chernobyl accident through a friend of mine. Her husband came from Belarus, and they were more impacted than the Ukraine at the time when this happened. So I was naturally very interested to learn a little bit more about it. When the accident happened, I would have been 11 years old. So I'm clueless on the best of days. And so at 11, I really didn't know much about it. I'd heard about it, didn't really know exactly what had happened. And so I developed a passion for this. And over the past 12 years, I've seen the available research go from basically nothing and a lot of contradictory and mythological type of information to what we have today, which definitely seems to be a lot more substantial and based in fact than what we had back then.
Was the Soviet Union somewhat successful in trying to sweep this under the rug?
That's an excellent question. I think over time, well, as we see now, I think even with more time, we'll find that a lot has been swept under the rug. It's part of it's no fault of their own, because I don't know. I'm not convinced that the Soviet Union really understood just how deep this would cut. Even when the accident happened 30 years ago, they had a lot of inexperienced staff working that night, running this test. It was a test that had been run, a year prior, without any incident. At the time, this was one of the safest designs for a nuclear power plant. There were questions raised for a lot of reasons. Some of them I talk about in the novel. But yeah, I think we'll find that they really tried hard to sweep a lot of the facts under the rug, like you mentioned. One of the things that I found initially was the Soviet Union was really slow in evacuating the townspeople. That doesn't seem to be the case today. Our research shows that it happened within a day and a half. And the other part that doesn't work to the benefit of the Soviets in this case is that they weren't the first to come to the world with what had happened. It was in Sweden, 620 miles away, where the first traces of higher radiation levels were discovered. And as a consequence of that, that whistle was blown. So it wasn't even the Soviets that came out and said, "Hey, listen, we have a problem on our hands." It was Sweden.
Morgan, what were the circumstances leading up to the disaster?
I think we forget, what's happened, like what was going on at the time. So it's timely right now, especially in the States as you come to the polls. But at the time, we had Reagan and Gorbachev that were at each other's throats. They both saw each other as a threat. The Soviet Union was basically running out of money. And so when it comes to this reactor, we see a lot. We see that the materials that were sent were, a lot of them were defective. A lot of the materials never showed up. And yet they were able to take this timeline for the construction of reactor 4 from, I think it was 18 months or 24 months, and they were able to have it on the grid within a year. So substantially quicker than, what you'd see today. I don't even know if you can build a residential house of high quality in such a short time, like take it from 9 months down to 3. But that's what they effectively did. And there were people really pushing the safety issue at the time. A lot of it went ignored. And again, speaking to the inexperience of the people on site, they were coming out saying it was safe when clearly it wasn't, because people outside of the power facility were claiming that it wasn't safe at all.
Well, the largest nuclear disaster of our time. So here we are 30 years later, and I know that your novel deals a lot with life after. What did you discover?
Well, today, we're still, when I say we, I mean, 40 countries are still trying to contain this nuclear disaster. When it happened 30 years ago, a rushed, botched job was done to contain a lot of that radioactivity. It worked to a degree. There was still a lot of leakage, but today, 40 countries are pitching in $1.7 billion to contain it. And that's just at the reactor core. So, we start looking at wildlife. We look at, some of the other resources in the area, forestry, the land. I mean, they can't farm the land. There's absolutely nothing there. So 30 years later, we've really killed this great mass of our planet. And so, the novel does talk a lot about that human element. That's really what I was after with this is, the stories of the people that were living in that area at the time and how they went from a prosperous lifestyle, because this town was very prosperous. It was the only area or the only place in the Soviet Union where you could buy, fancy perfume like Chanel. So it was really the privileged part of the Soviet Union. But you had everyday people there. You had people that walked their kids to school. You had people that were, they're gearing up for what they call the May Day festivities, which was, like the 4th of July type of thing. And there were a lot of lives that were impacted by this. And that's really what I wanted to get to with the novel, is that everyday life that changed at the snap of the fingers.
Well, their life is forever changed. I forgot, how many people lost their lives in that disaster?
It's a good question. I mean, I've seen a number as low as 30. I've seen numbers as high as several hundred thousands. Because the reality is the direct loss of life is one thing, but then the fallout from the disaster is quite another. Thyroid cancer is at the time was something that came up as a side effect of the exposure to the radiation. So all those people, even though they might not have been there fighting the fire with the sand and the shovels, they were impacted as well. They either sacrificed their lives, or the lives of their loved ones were gone, and now here they are suffering with life-threatening diseases. Right, so it's not happy. And so when you look at a number, you can almost take a dart and just throw it randomly at a dartboard to come up with what that number is. But it is very substantial.
All right, let me say to our viewers and listeners, the name of the book is called 1986. There's a picture of it there on the screen. Look for it at Amazon and also at Barnes & Noble. You can go to officialmorganparker.com. That's his website, officialmorganparker.com. Morgan, a few seconds we have left. What do you want people to take away from this book?
A couple things. I mean, if I can push my own bias in a couple seconds, I mean, as much as we can learn from an experience like this, we can't accommodate every little potential hiccup. I mean, we saw this with in Japan not that long ago. A great facility, and yet a natural disaster basically ruined it, and we had another big radiation leak at that facility. So I'd be careful. And, when you're heading to the polls, keep in mind that your government is really an important part of your life. And the people in the Soviet Union in 1986, they might have taken that for granted, and, they paid the price.
Well, thank you for your work. Keep up the good work, and let's have you back soon, okay?
That sounds good. Thanks a lot for your time, Perry.
All right, thank you. Again, officialmorganparker.com is his website, and look for the book. It'll be out in June. It's called 1986 by Morgan Parker. We'll be right back.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.